Hello everyone, welcome to the course of Climate Change Extreme Events. In the previous summary class of week 1, we had discussed about what we have covered so far in this lecture 1, lecture 2 and lecture 3. Then in the summary lecture, we have also discussed about one of the assignment where we have to analyze the, let us say, rainfall pattern of different areas across India. We have also given a brief detail about how we can get the data from, let us say, data.gov.in website, and from there you can download the data which is in the form of Excel, and then that data can be used for let us say get an more detailed insight about what is the overall rainfall pattern across different months for different regions across India. So, to solve that problem, we have to first go through the data set. So, first I'll briefly discuss you about how this data exactly looks like. Then we can have I'll discuss about one by one how to solve that problem which I have given in the assignment number 1. So, in my screen you can see that this is the file which I referred in my previous lecture in an Excel file. Here you can see that there is a different regions which are listed here. So, you can go in the further down you can see there are several different regions. For example, here Assam, Meghalaya, and then we have then multiple other regions like that, Tripura and something like that. So, let us keep this file at the top. Okay. So, here you have also the data set is divided into different subdivisions. You have number of years where the data is spanning from 1901 to, let us say, for Andaman and Nicobar Island is up to 2017. For example, here you can see that this is 2017 and this is now again for, let us say, Arunachal Pradesh, the data starts from 1916 and then it has up to 2017, then again another region like that. So, this is the whole data which is we have different years information. Then you have in the next column is the month, which is January, February, March, April and May. And then we have June, July, August, September, October, November and December. These are the individual months rainfall. The value here represents the rainfall amount which happened during this particular month, and the unit of this value is millimeters. Then you have after December you have another column which is called annual rainfall data set. So, what is this? Basically, when you add all these values together, you will get the value of annual data for individual region for each year. Then you have another column which is JNF, which is January and February data for cumulative sum of your January and February month for that particular region for that particular year. Then you have March, April and May. Then you have JJAS, which is June, July, August and September, and then you have OND, which is called October, November and December rainfall amount. So, the JJAS is called monsoon months, where the monsoonal activities occur during this particular month's period. So, this is the value is representing what is the rainfall we received during the monsoonal month, which is June, July, August and September, and rest of the month you can consider as a non-monsoonal month. For example, October, November, December, January, February, March, April and May. So, this is how this data sets is represented by this particular file. So, in the previous class we had discussed about these the three questions we have to solve using the Excel file which we have just described. How do the annual, monsoon and non-monsoon rainfall time series behave for two different regions? Please elaborate on their specific characteristics. So, how we can go to this particular problem? So, we can go to this Excel sheet again. Here you can see this is, so the first problem is you have to know about what is the the rainfall amount for different regions, like that, annual, monsoon and non-monsoon rainfall for different regions. So, for this this is the regional division we have already have. So, in the Excel you can do this analysis in Excel, or maybe you can also use Google Excel or also that can also work. So, in this column maybe you can apply filter here. So, filter, how you can go? So, in this data tab you can go to the filter, and click it here, and then this option will appear. Here in this option you click here, and now you can select or deselect all. Now, from this particular list you can select any region which you are interested in. For example, I will select here, let us say East Madhya Pradesh. So, now the data set is organized in East Madhya Pradesh region. The data set starts from 1901 to 2017, and then you have all these different months and these informations. Now, the first question is to solve how to the annual monsoon and non-monsoon rainfall varies, behaves in two different regions. So, annual, monsoon and non-monsoon rainfall. So, in the annual, so this is your time series data. So, this is your time series data. In this data you can select all these values, all the values till 2017, and then you can go to the insert option here, and then you can click figure. A time series figure like this. Suppose I am selecting this figure. Now, you can see that this is the rainfall distribution of East Madhya Pradesh region from 1901 to 2017. Here the x axis are representing 1 to 117 values, which are basically representing the total number of years, and here your y values are representing the amount of rainfall which received during these different number of years, like that. So, here if you can see that there are few years where you received a very huge amount of rainfall during the annual time period for individual years. For example, these 2 years, if you click it here, point number 19 or 1919, and then there is another year which is called 0.26, and the value is 1726.8, which is 1926 year, where we have received a very high amount of rainfall in East Madhya Pradesh region. If you generally look at the trend of the data, you can see that the data sets showing there is a less extreme values in the recent decades. Generally, it is stabilizing in this particular zone 1400 to 18800 region, like that, and there are few instances the rainfall crosses this particular range. For example, during let us say 1994 we have seen a very significant amount of rainfall which is crossed 1400 threshold, which is 1533 mm almost. And then you have another crossing event which is like 2013, where the East Madhya Pradesh region received 1521 mm rainfall. You can also change the axis or add the property of axis, format axis, and then you can write the name and all labels, and all these properties you can change here with your you can also change the font size. You can also change here for example the numbers which is representing here is years. You can also numbers are representing only the number, but you can also change it to the years also. So, this is how you can see that variability of annual rainfall for East Madhya Pradesh. Now, I will delete this figure and then I will go to another figure which is basically the monsoon rainfall. So, here the JJAS is your monsoon rainfall. So, what you can do, you can again select all the values of JJAS, which is June, July, August, September value, and then you can go to the insert data and you can basically select here this figure, not like this. Again I will try. So, here you can go this figure. You can see that there is a values which are representing the monsoon level fluctuation of East Madhya Pradesh across different years. You can see that there are several years very recently where we received a very huge amount of rainfall during monsoon period, which is JJAS, right. So, and there are several years where we have received a very low amount of rainfall during monsoon months. So, this is the figure which shows about the monsoonal fluctuation of East Madhya Pradesh region. You can also see that there is a higher variability occurred during past 10-15 years. Very low and very high amount of rainfall happened in the past 10-15 years, like that in the East Madhya Pradesh. So, you can also change the axis, name of the axis. Here you can change the years and you can change the, let us say, title of the talk this particular chart, and you can basically add monsoonal rainfall distribution of one region, Madhya Pradesh, for example. Here I have selected. Then you can also go to let us say what is the rainfall amount for non-monsoonal months. So, here how we can calculate, you can use the Excel formula. Here you can add January and February, then plus March and April, then plus except June, July, August, September, this is October, November and December, that is plus. Then I will hit the enter button, and then this is basically your the non-monsoonal months rainfall data set. Now, here it is the complete data set for all these years for non-monsoonal months. Okay. So, here all the data sets are now suggesting the, let us say I am calling it this column is non-monsoon. Now, you can use again, you can select all these this column and you can insert here same plot, which will tell you about how the rainfall is varying during the non-monsoon. If you can look at this figure, it tells that in the mid of the century the non-monsoonal rainfall has been significantly decreased. There are few instances like this one, where we have received a very huge amount of rainfall during non-monsoon season also, which is crossed around 255.9. Before 1950, we have several instances where we have received a very huge amount of rainfall in the non-monsoonal period for East Madhya Pradesh region. So, this analysis gives an idea about how the climate behavior has been changed across different months in the eastern Madhya Pradesh region throughout a century. Now, the second problem we have discussed about how we can let us say how we can identify the years in which extreme rainfall events occurs during the monsoon and non-monsoon. As we have already suggested, you can make a plot of these data set, and you can basically identify those years where you have extreme rainfall and where we have the low amount of rainfall. That is, we have already discussed that. Okay. Now, the third part of this problem is we want to discuss about how to quantify the percentage contribution of monsoon rainfall to the total annual rainfall. And this is very important because it will give you a sense that how much amount of rainfall has occurred during monsoon month and how much amount of rainfall has occurred during the non-monsoonal month. That will give you an idea about what is the total percentage of rainfall which we have received during the monsoonal month particularly. So, how to calculate this? So, basically this is your, let us say, JJAS, your monsoon month, and this is your non-monsoon month. You can take a sum of this, or it is already there, which is annual value. You can cross check again. So, you can add here equal sign, then monsoon month plus non-monsoon month, and then hit the enter button. And now, using this option, you can basically extrapolate all these values for whole column. Then again here, let us say, okay. Now, we have calculated the total amount of rainfall during each different using summing of non-monsoon and monsoon months. Here it is almost similar. Now, you can compare 639, 639.3, 1354, 1354. There is slight difference, but it is almost similar. Now, you can calculate what is the total amount of percentage rainfall received during the monsoon month. How you can do that? You can hit a equal button, then basically you can calculate, you can select this number, this is JJAS rainfall, then divided by total amount of rainfall. This is the, let us say I am calling, no, 1 minute. So, let us say I am calling this column as total amount of rainfall, and now in this column I am calling, let us say percentage monsoon rainfall, and then here in this column I am saying percentage non-monsoon. Okay. So, here percentage monsoon, percentage non-monsoon. So, now I have created two different column, which is called percentage monsoon rainfall and then percentage non-monsoon rainfall. Okay. Now, I have to calculate what is the percentage rainfall received during the monsoon month. How we can do that? We can click this column, this cell again, and then write a formula. So, this is equal sign. When you start the write a formula, before that you always write a equal sign in the Excel. Then for monsoon month, you have to select the JJAS value. Before that, you have to apply bracket, then JJAS divided by total amount of rainfall. Then this bracket is closed, and then multiplied by 100. So, this will give you an idea about how much rainfall we receive during the monsoon month. Now, you can further calculate these values for all these columns. Now, you can see this is the total amount of rainfall we have received during the monsoon month, the percentage one. Now, you can also calculate what is the percentage non-monsoon rainfall. So, you can again write equal sign, then you can add here a bracket, small bracket, then basically the non-monsoon month here divided by the total amount of rainfall, this bracket is closed, and then multiplied by 100. So, here you have got this value, and then you can apply it for all the cells. So, now you know that, now you can see that here what is the total amount of rainfall we received during the monsoon month and what is the total amount of rainfall we received during the non-monsoon month. So, you can make a plot of this, let us say this is all the values. Now, you can add a plot here, insert, and then again this plot. Now, you can see that in entire time period since 1901 to 2017 almost, we have the rainfall varies between 80 to 90 and sometimes more than 90%, which means in eastern Madhya Pradesh region 80 to more than 90% rainfall we receive during the monsoon month. There are few instances where the rainfall receives like more than 95% or more than 97, 98, this is the percentage we have also received like that. So, this is the one of the distribution tells about how the climatology of this particular region and how it has been behaved throughout the time period. Now, we can again delete this figure. Of course, you can modify that figure adding the x axis, y axis, some title of the figure, and then you can add to your report. Or then in the percentage non-monsoon month, you can basically select again the whole column, and then basically you can click the insert here, and then you can insert one map. Now, you can see that the rainfall is varying between most of the time between 5% to 20%, and there are quite a few instances in the past 30-40 years where the rainfall has breached the amount of 20% during the non-monsoon. So, that is also signaling the change in the climatological behavior of the rainfall over the past 30-40 years in the eastern Madhya Pradesh region. There are few instances also where we have a very low amount of non-monsoonal rainfall. If there is a low amount of non-monsoonal rainfall, which means there is a higher chances of severe drought events or water scarcity or some sort of low water availability periods in the eastern Madhya Pradesh. And when we have higher non-monsoonal month or also the monsoonal rainfall pattern, which means can be attributed to, let us say, high flow conditions or floods periods as well. So, using this data set, we would be able to figure it out how the climatology of let us say eastern Madhya Pradesh region has been behaved from since past 100 years, more than 100 years. You can repeat this analysis for another region of your interest from the list, and then you can compare these two regions according to their differences in climatological conditions, how the rainfall pattern has been. Let us say you can select another region here. I deselect East Madhya Pradesh. Now, let us say I am selecting East Uttar Pradesh here, and now you can see there is a these columns are empty now. Now, you can calculate non-monsoonal rainfall, total rainfall, percentage monsoon rainfall and percentage non-monsoon rainfall. and then you can basically plot these values similarly what we have already discussed for the eastern Madhya Pradesh region, and then you can compare, is there any significant change in the climatological behavior during the monsoon month for one particular region or another region, or for example what happened during the non-monsoonal season. So, in this lecture, this assignment session, solving session, we have discussed about how we can use the historical monthly rainfall data set to calculate the climatological pattern of one particular region, and we can also identify, is there any change in the climatological behavior since past, let us say 100 years, or is there any trend of the data, or is there any abrupt change in the time series data set, or do we have any particular years where we received a very huge amount of rainfall that leads to, or that basically explains why we have why we had the flooding events during that particular years like that. Or let us say when we have a drought periods in past few years back, is there this data also corroborate that the rainfall was very low during the non-monsoon or other months like that. So, I hope you have learned from this whole exercise about how to handle rainfall data for different months for different regions to basically identify the overall climatological conditions of different regions across India. Thank you very much for the attention.